Oh,
Oh.
it was
Recording
really creepy.
started.
We will now call the April 14th, 2020 regular meeting of council to order. Item 2.1, adoption of the agenda. I believe we have a late item, Councillor Pearson.
Yeah, one late item, amendment to the agenda that was emailed out to everybody. A recommendation from tourism committee. The council consider putting together a technical working group involving representatives to discuss short-term divergence of pipeline workers to local accommodations. So I'm not sure where
So as amended.
Yep.
Councillor Blanchette, Councillor G, any further additions? Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed? It carries. 3.1, public comment. Mr. Robinson, did you have any further written comments? I have one from Ms. Jungle.
Nothing further, Your Worship.
You have all received it via email. For transparency, I will read the comment. Good day, Wayne, Mr. Mayor and Council. First, I am not sure if a comment can be made on an item in the reading file. If not, that is understandable. Pardon me for not knowing. My rebuttal to that is yes, you can make a comment on an item in the reading file. As a small business owner, and even in these challenging times, I would like to stress one more time how certain changes in these year property taxes and deadlines will greatly help most of us. I do understand that not all decisions are up to the village, as it was explained to me previously. Not increasing the taxes this year would be huge. Deferring taxes to a later date and or at least penalty-free late payments should be considered. I absolutely know that we cannot compare Valemount to Jasper, but Jasper has decided the planned 5.3% tax increase will be halted, taxes will be deferred. We are all in this together, and I'm not asking for freebies, but much appreciated help. Don't forget that after a probable summer write-off comes a very slow winter. This will be winter in decline as of after this crisis, if we can call it after this fall. People won't have much money or any money to spend. Best regards, Valemount Swiss Bakery, Sylvia Jungle. So again, just my comments around that, as it would be in the chambers. Deferment is a provincial, under provincial jurisdiction. Penalty fees, Mr. Robinson, remind me, we don't have any in place until the year end.
That's actually for our utilities. There are late payment fees for actual property taxes from my recollection from my last discussion with the Director of Finance.
Do we have a quarter in which those late payment fees are implemented?
My recollection is that is after it starts immediately after the due date. Sorry, it's not an interest. There's a late there's a penalty fee that's attached. That's right after the due date.
Okay, thank you very much. Seeing that there were no further public comments, motion to receive. Councillor Pearson, Councillor Blanchette, all in favor of receipt. Opposed? It carries. 4.1, adoption of the March 24, 2020 regular meeting of council. Motion please. Councillor Blanchette, Councillor Pearson. Are there any errors or omissions? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? It carries. And just remind council that the late item will be under new business. There we go. Late items will be under the under new business. We do have correspondence for action. Regional District, Village of Fort George, impending a letter to BC Hydro for EV charging stations in the Peace region. What's council's wish? Essentially, this letter would be penned in support of the Regional District's support of adding a charging station to the actual district, whereas BC Hydro would be putting it at the very south end of, I believe it's Highway 37. Pete, have you been up in that? Sorry, Councillor Pearson, you've been up in that region?
Yes, I have. And yeah, my understanding is it would be at the, I don't know if it'd be considered south or the west end of 37 going into Mackenzie.
So seeing how there is a movement of EV tourism, and given the economic impacts that industry is presenting to the District of Mackenzie, it would be very helpful if we could pen a letter in support of that. Councillor Blanchette.
I'll move that we
G.
send the letter.
Thank you. Councillor G, did you want to second that?
Yes, I would second that.
I did see your hand move. A discussion on penning a letter. Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed? I will get writing. Is there anything, it carries. Is there anything out of the reading files folks would like to bring out? Councillor Pearson.
Yeah, I'd like to pull the letter regarding backyard chickens for discussion. So there's been lots of talk in the community, especially now with food security and such. So I think I would like to make a motion that we refer this to staff to do some background study and compare with other communities and see what our options are moving forward towards controlled possession of chickens in backyards.
Seconder of that, Councillor McLean. Thank you. I have a discussion on the motion. Councillor Pearson, you're unmuted. Did you want to have first crack at discussion?
Oh, sorry. No, I think it's something we should look at, and what regulations and restrictions that have to be in place, whether it's lot size, number of chickens, etc. But you know, if staff could put together a report for us moving forward for the community. All
right. Further discussion, Councillor Blanchette.
Maybe we could also have a letter from our animal bylaw officer, because this is going to be a concern that we need to get addressed.
And I'm sure as it's being referred to back to staff, we'll receive many comments from most departments. Further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carries. Anything else from the reading file? I will pull the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. No, sorry. Canadian Federation of Independent Business. A lot of what Ms. Jungo's letter was also may have been referring to was that particular document. And seeing that she did make reference to deferment, this letter also makes some recommendations as to waiving interest and penalties for unpaid property taxes installments for a minimum of 30 days, waive all interest penalties for unpaid water and wastewater billings for a minimum of 60 days. So we do that already, as Mr. Robinson said already. We don't have penalties until the end of the year on utilities, Mr. Robinson. And it is penalties following the July 2 cutoff for taxation. Okay. Something we can certainly look at. And number 3, they call on for us to call on the provincial government to expand property tax deferral program to provide immediate relief for small businesses and nonprofits. The calls that I've been on with mayors and chairs, that is a growing concern and something that's being repeated throughout the province. So it is being looked at, definitely. Just wanted to make that aware for everybody. Was there anything else in the reading file, folks wanted to have a boo? Moving on. I didn't see any hands. 9.1, building inspection report, March 2020 to be received. Councillor Pearson. Councillor Blanchette. Any comments on the staff report? Hearing none, all in favor of receipt? And opposed? Carries. 9.2, investing in Canada Infrastructure Program, Dogwood Lift Station. A couple recommendations here. Mr. Robinson, did you want these separated? I see an and a comma between the recommendations.
Yeah, that would be best if you could separate them, please.
Number 1, that staff submit an application for grant funding under the Dogwood Lift Station Upgrade Project through the ICIP, the Green Infrastructure Environmental Quality Substream, in the amount of $1,376,360. Councillor McLean, Councillor Pearson, are there any discussion points around recommendation 1 or on the motion as it stands? Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed? Cross your fingers. Carries. And that council supports the project and commits to its share, $513,080 of the project through Northern Capital and Planning Grant. Councillor G, Councillor Pearson, discussion on the 513. Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed? Carries. 9.3, Village of Valemount Asset Management Plan from Urban Systems, that it be approved, that we approve the AMP from Urban Systems. Councillor Blanchette, Councillor McLean, any discussion points around approving the report? Everybody's understanding that we're quite shy in the finance department in terms of asset management. I think that's putting it nicely. All in favor of adoption, or sorry, of approving the report? Opposed? It carries. 9.4, council procedure bylaw. First recommendation that second reading of bylaw 815-2020 be rescinded. Councillor Blanchette, Councillor G, discussion. we're essentially rescinding this because, as in the report, was put forth as a non-COVID matter during a time in which it could be challenged. Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? It is rescinded. And that Village of Valemount Council Procedure Bylaw 815 be tabled, 2020 be tabled until after the current provincial state of emergency is rescinded by the province. Councillor G, Councillor Pearson, discussion. So the current state of emergency expires tomorrow, at which point I'm anticipating it being put back up again for another 14-day period, given Dr. Henry's comments recently that she does not foresee any orders being dropped until at least the 1st of May. Some further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? It carries and is tabled. Uh, 10.1, public art policy number 70. Staff are asking to approve an amendment as proposed. It's council's wish. Councillor Blanchette, Councillor G, any discussion on the proposed amendments? Councillor Blanchette.
So in reading this here, it says final decisions regarding the placement of public art are still made by council. So we have a committee, the CIP committee, that does the CBT funding, and we put our all of them make the decisions, and council has always, to my knowledge, gone with everything they decide. Even though sometimes we have questions or queries and we're not really sure that we agree with that committee, we still let it go. So my concern is about this committee here and council making that decision. Is the committee, what the committee says, still going to be what we say, okay, fine. You know, it's all well and good to have a committee, it's important, but if we're not going to agree with some of the decisions they make, how is this going to work? I'm just a bit concerned that it's going to be like the CBT CIP committee.
You raised some interesting points. We have in the past, as a council, disagreed with committees. I remember one incident where the Tourism Valemount forwarded a recommendation on terms of reference and how voting privileges would be kind of sought out in favor of the accommodation sector, and there was a disagreement at the council level, and it was voted down and sent back to the committee. To your point, to the CIP committee, yeah, it's something that we will perhaps have to risk. If we have the talent on the public art committee that we do have on the CIP committee, they're in for some interesting and difficult decision making.
And I agree, but I don't want to feel like I have to agree with the committee. And that's where I'm having a bit of an issue. I know that it's not written in stone, but we've just, I mean, ever since I've been on council, we have never once, to my recollection, ever said, well, no, I don't think that funding is, you know, we don't agree with that. Even though there's been a lot of talk and chatter, we've always gone with what the committee recommends.
And, you know, the terms of reference are not created yet. staff will have a bit of a challenge there. There are other terms that can be compared and benchmarked, but there will be disagreement. Art is subjective, and your one members of council view of art will be certainly different from another person's view, and it'll be subjective even at the committee level. So whoever one of you, should this second recommendation go ahead, be selected to sit on this committee, will have that opportunity for discussion at the committee level.
Okay, well, it's being put out there, so it's food for thought, right?
Absolutely. Any other discussion points on the current motion? Councillor Pearson.
I agree with Councillor Blanchette on this. I mean, we have, no control on the appointees to a committee, and to be left sitting with what could be a universally unpleasant decision for all of us kind of puts us in a tough spot without that, check and balance at council levels. So it is a concern, but yeah, I guess put our trust in whoever gets selected for this committee.
Further discussions to the amendment of the current art policy. Councillor G.
I think that our existing policy doesn't really give us this extra bit of examination into an application. So by having a committee that does that work for us and then gives us a report, it gives us a whole bunch of different viewpoints and work looking into something rather than have it just plunked on our desk and we have to make a decision right away. So I think that we do have some say into who is on the committee because people are applying for it, if I read that correctly. It's not just, did I read that right? Persons deemed to have appropriate expertise, knowledge, and sound judgment, and who are at arm's length from the project. I think that would give us some really good input into any future proposed public art, and maybe give us a more unbiased opinion of what's being proposed without having all of the onus just be on us to decide kind of at the 10th second kind of thing.
Oh, that's a good point. Further discussion on the motion? All in favor of the proposed amendments? Opposed? It carries. We have a second recommendation before us, that staff be directed to advertise for applications from those interested in sitting on the committee and to prepare a terms of reference for council's review. Councillor Pearson, Councillor Blanchette, discussion on the advertisement and or reviewing of what would be the terms of reference. Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed? It carries. Okay, 11.1, council reports. Councillor McLean, what have you been up to?
I have just had one thing, and sorry, it was another Columbia River Treaty Local Government Committee telecon. There was nothing to report out from this particular meeting. There actually was something in the reading file regarding the decision of us not to request official observer status during the recommendations. I should have pulled that from the reading file, but it's there for anyone to read. One of the reasons was that there was no elected officials sitting as observers. on any of this, and that we have total respect and a good working relationship with the negotiation team. So we decided to leave things where they are. And that was it for me.
Awesome. Still a big meeting. Councillor Pearson on the same side of the what would be the chambers. You may have to unmute yourself.
Got to get used to that. Need a remote button. So the only thing I have to report actually was this afternoon's tourism meeting. Very good discussion on a lot of items. And we will be discussing more of that in the new business with the lead item. And that was all for me.
Thank you. Councillor G.
Other than a plethora of emails, which take up a lot of time reading, I don't have any meetings to report.
Thank you. Yep, I emptied my inbox of pre-COVID business, and I still had 1,653. Councillor Blanchette, what have you been up?
Burying myself out of the emails. On the 26th, I joined you with the Minister Farnsworth call. That was quite interesting, very illuminating, a little bit frustrating, but it's really great to see that the provincial government's reaching out so much. So it's nice to have that support and know that it's there. We may not agree with what they're deciding, but it is nice that they're there listening and trying to do whatever they can. What I'd like to do is encourage everybody to pick up the phone book and just reach out to anybody. Just pick 3 people every morning with your coffee. I've been doing it just to check in with people, not just seniors, everybody. We're all here, we're all at home. Just reach out, see what anybody's doing, see if they need any help, see if they just need a good chuckle. I've been doing it, it makes me feel really good. It makes the other person on the other end feel really good knowing that somebody's out there. So I would really appreciate it if we could all just sort of remember that some people have family and that's great, but some people don't. And some people just want to chat with somebody new and different. So that's all I have to report. Thank you.
Do you have a decent knock-knock joke to clear the ice on these calls?
The only thing I do have is the quite excitement of taking out the garbage and wondering, what do I wear?
Thanks for that. I have forwarded my last 3 week schedule to staff, but I'll kind of just buzz through this. March 26th, I was appointed to the Columbia Basin Broadband Corporation by the Columbia Basin Trust back in December, January, so had my first distant meeting there. Again, March 26th, we had with Councillor Blanchette a scheduled update with Minister Farnsworth and Minister Robinson. March 27th, TMX update. March 29th, Zoom meeting with all RMI mayors, seeing what's working, what's not. March 30th, CBT board meeting, regular board held at a distance. March 31st, emergency services briefing here in, for Valemount. April 1st, I was hoping the COVID pandemic was a grand global prank. April 2nd, Northern Health Authority update. April 3rd, Community Futures, Community Development Institute Roundtable. That was with some businesses and nonprofits from Mackenzie, McBride, Dunster, and the Valemount area. Meeting with Dr. Helseth and his team to begin discussions on recovery. A lot of it was around employment and employer rights, who you can and who you cannot lay off due to not following the recommendations. So some interesting discussion there. April 3rd, same day, Highway 16 corridor update. So with MLA Bond and Mayor Runts, various RD directors, Chair Kane, Vice Chair Beckett. and Mayor Hall from Prince George. Later that day, another TMX update. So Friday's TMX is really committed to having some fruitful discussion, usually 10, 15, 20 minutes. Jasmine Devick and I looking at different ways we can still stimulate the economy and manage risk. April 6th, had a conference call with CN Rail and Councillor Pearson. It's talking about the influx of workers coming in. So they'll be coming in. They came in on the 2nd, this first round. Councillor be over on Thursday with a 4-day layoff and rejoining us till what, about the 29th. So a good 3 weeks while they're here. Where am I? April 7th, Valemount Emergency Services briefing. So that's it's a weekly briefing every Tuesday with Dr. Markham, Fire Chief Lalonde, Paramedic Chief McClure, and what am I missing? Sergeant Dean and company. April 8th, had an update from Rec Sites and Trails BC about what is closed and what isn't. There's some mixed messages there. Riding areas are closed, but the trails to them are not. And then also having the closure through Mike Wigley and CMH, Canadian Mountain Holidays, really opened up the backcountry to some really untouched snowmobiling areas, or what could be snowmobiling areas. April 8th, Ministry of Forest and BC Timber Sales had a planning activities update. So workers, tree planters, road techs coming in to, again, for Valemount Community Forest planters, BCTS planters, and further assessments on the Hugh Allen wildfire from last summer. April 9th, CBC radio interview. April 9th, the scheduled briefing with Minister Robinson. April 13th, CBC radio interview. April 13th, a Trans Mountain update, which today, or yesterday, sorry. Again, an emergency services briefing today, and I sat in as ex officio at the Tourism Valemount Committee. That was all for me.
That's not very much stuff, gee.
No.
You're earning your keep.
No. I asked Mr. Robinson for a raise. It was turned down. Motion please to receive council reports. Opposed? It's carried. New business, Councillor Pearson.
Okay, I'll unmute myself this time. So today, in today's tourism committee meeting, we had a very good discussion, and one of the items was brought up was a Valemount Economic Recovery and Risk Management plan. I think we all realize that tourism this season is a write-off. Even if the restrictions are lifted, we will not see a tourism season like we're used to. So it was brought to the committee, and much discussion on our options to try and keep them alive. With no heads in the beds, I mean, the smaller businesses are not going to be able to stay afloat. So it's kind of a funny conundrum, because with the whole TMX startup, the whole thing with the camp was to keep them away from town and isolated, and they agreed. And now we're in a position where it's like, we could really use those heads in our beds. So the recommendation was that council look at forming a technical working group that would involve representatives from the Village, Northern Health, Tourism Valemount, Trans Mountain, Chamber of Commerce, emergency services and Ministry of Transportation if required, to look at approaching TMX with the option of reducing the number of men in the camp and putting some of those in, moving them into local accommodation. There's lots of pros and cons that would have to be looked at. You know, we had concerns with CN coming into town and integrating into the community. The same concerns would happen with this, but we really need to look at some structure that could possibly help out the accommodation sector, plus local restaurants with takeout and that sort of thing. So that's our recommendation from the committee, is that we strike a committee, sit down and look at this as soon as possible, and see what our options are. I mean, we may be told flat out that it's just not a workable solution. You know, and the one viewpoint was the camp's going to be built regardless. Those contracts have been signed.
Can I just break in there, Councillor?
Certainly.
Perhaps if you would like to craft a motion referring this to staff,
Okay.
to look at kind of the legalities of not looking at, just refer this to staff. They can reach out to the independent the representative organizations, and then we can perhaps talk further on the tourism discussion points from the Tourism Valemount meeting.
Okay. I guess I was getting a little wordy. So yeah, so I guess my motion would be that we recommend that staff look at putting together a technical working group to look at this subject and move forward from there.
You second that, Councillor Blanchette? Thank you.
Yeah.
So in the discussion today, there was some timing. Certainly, we've entered into a nesting season, so there's not going to be a whole lot of this construction now between now and June-ish. Sort of Ledcor Sheechum, the contractor that's been awarded the work, is already here. They're doing work behind the scenes surveying. They've already integrated into our local accommodation, Eagle Rock, Dawson. You hardly see them. You might see a Simp Resources Group security truck because they are bright and beautiful tundras, but you don't see them really at the grocery store that I've noticed. Also, the timing of construction through this neck of the woods being sort of a sandy gravel and granite, you'd like to probably see that in September, which would be pre-frost. So you'd see activities like access point construction from major routes like Highway 5 down into the pipeline itself. And then you start getting into winter, down into where Summit River Lodge is. That's pretty marshy area all the way through. As you climb out of Calamina drainage and up into Allen Creek, you start getting into some rock again. But some various wet areas that would have to be reserved for the cooler periods of the year. So this isn't just I don't think this would be long-term, Councillor Pearson, if you read that right. This would be a short-term kind of make up for the summer season that would be lacking. They're still building the 650, 700 person camp, pardon me. But with the shorter, smaller worker groups being integrated into local accommodation, and just seeing what that would actually look like as what the technical working group would be All yours, Councillor, if you wanted to add anything to that.
No, actually, I'm good. I kind of lost you at the end there. You're breaking up, but yeah, I think it's something, I mean, as a stopgap measure to support the accommodation sector and the restaurant sector. Something for us to look at anyway.
Mr. Robinson, you had a question to the motion?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Staff is still a little unclear what you mean by a working group or a technical working group. Are you looking for basically a council committee, or are you looking for staff to reach out to stakeholders such as, say, Northern Health Authority, Trans Mountain, and seeing if they're in favor of such a thing?
Councillor Pearson, what's your view there?
My impression from the discussions was it would be, I think it would be a roundtable group of stakeholders to have this discussion. You know, it could be a matter of reaching out and seeing, but I think the discussion would sort of be a good face-to-face if we could get that group on a Zoom meeting or something and have that face-to-face talk and see what we could do to sort of alleviate the matters for our tourism.
Mr. Administrator?
So to summarize, what you're actually looking for then is more of an opportunity for staff to contact these different groups, set up a time, bring them together so that we can have a roundtable discussion with them on this topic.
That would be my understanding, yes.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, Owen, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Mr. Administrator, do you sense that an amendment to that motion is needed, or are you getting the spirit of the motion?
Now that I have the spirit of it, that makes perfect sense when I understand the context behind it. It's looking for staff to create a technical working group and then see what can happen from there. So it's basically just building a meeting is what you're looking for. Perfect. Thank you.
Councillor Pearson, you're in agreement? You were the mover.
Yep. No, that was the intent of the motion, yes.
Councillor Blanchette?
I think we also have to move really, really fast on this too, right?
Yeah, time is the essence in this one for sure.
Further discussion on the very spirited motion? Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed? It carries. Nothing to proceed in camera, so motion to adjourn. Councillor Pearson. Thank you all very much. I think this was a very good first run at a council meeting. I don't anticipate us meeting in person on the 28th, given the current climate. So brush up on your Zoom skills, and we'll see you at a distance.
You bet. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Good night.
you.